Hey guys, this is the second episode of my series on my experience in ATI. Today I'm going to be talking about how ATI recruited people into the group and kind of how cults do that in general to give a little bit of background. So the two resources that I have been getting my information from is Stephen Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control, and the other place is the website recoveringgrace.org. Every time I say that book name, I get a little bit like my mind goes blank. Anyways, I tried to do a non-visual podcast, but that didn't work. The photos, the visuals that I needed to use were showing up super pixelated, so I'm just going to do a visual podcast for the rest of the episodes. So the topic that I'm talking about today, as I said, was how ATI recruited people into the group. And Stephen Hassan kind of gave some great information on that. And there were three components that he talked about that cults will use when they're trying to recruit people. The first step is unfreezing, the second step is changing, and then the third step is refreezing. So unfreezing is pretty, I guess, simplistic. Basically, the group is trying to break down your sense of logic, your comfort levels, to be able to indoctrinate you with the information they're trying to present. So Stephen Hassan talked about how a lot of groups will take people to a compound type place or a separate location and impart the information that they want to impart to you. Sometimes they will try to disorient the subjects by, depriving people of sleep or depriving people of food. I would say that's the more extreme groups. ATI was a lot more innocuous. As a matter of fact, I think they used the opposite technique. The reason I say that is, while ATI was, the prerequisites from being into ATI was the basic and the advanced seminar. While they did show those seminars at large buildings and hotel ballrooms and places like that, the basic for sure, and I believe also the advanced seminars, were shown in churches. Now, I found that to be very interesting, mainly because a church is not necessarily a place where you would feel disoriented. As a matter of fact, church is a lot of times where people feel safe. So you want to think back to the 80s and 90s. A lot of people really trusted their pastor. Their pastor presents this information and said, hey, this has really helped a lot of people. I really enjoyed the information that I was presented. I think everyone else should listen to this too. You, as the person at your church, are going to look at your pastor as, okay, my pastor already vetted this information, and my pastor seems to really like this information or feels like it changed his life in some kind of way. So you're going to be a lot less likely to be critical of the information presented to you. Because if you're critical of the information, you might be seen as being critical of the pastor. And in some churches, the pastor is a little bit more like, this is the information that God has imparted to me, and so I'm giving this information to you. So if you're already in a church that either you're afraid to go against the pastor for whatever reason, because maybe in the past you've seen how he's treated other people who question him, or if you just have a general trusting nature towards your pastor, you're going to accept that information a lot quicker. So I thought that was a very interesting aspect to IBLP, the seminars. But in general, the information that is imparted is usually not only sometimes in a disorienting location, but sometimes in a more where your fears are lowered. But also the information is just really bombarded at you all long time. So these conferences lasted several days, and the sessions were usually hours long. And when you're constantly being bombarded with information, it doesn't matter whether or not it's scientific information or, but in this case it was not really great information. your logic side cannot handle all of that information. Your brain just can't handle all of that information. And after a while, you kind of break and you just take in the information without thinking it through or without having the ability to think it through. And that's part of the reason why some of the more extreme groups will have their people be sleep deprived, because when you're sleep deprived, you can't think clearly and you just end up accepting the information a lot quicker than if you were thinking clearly. So that's kind of how ATI worked, and this is a really interesting side note that I wanted to talk about was that a lot of times the group leader, whoever was teaching, will say contradictory information. So it kind of makes your brain not be able to think clearly. So the best example I have of ATI displaying this kind of information was through the advanced seminar. This is one of the little pictures I was going to show you guys. I don't know if you can see that very well, but this is from the advanced seminar. And here are the two phrases around this diagram. So we have up here Satan, and then we have an arrow, then we have a protection, a group of people, and it says, the first paragraph says, as long as you are under God-given authority, nothing can happen to you that God does not design for your ultimate good. Okay. Then the second paragraph says, getting out from under the protection of scriptural direction of parents, church, employers, or government allows Satan to bring destruction. Okay? So, the way that I see how this information is pretty contradictory is the first sentence, really. As long as you are under God-given authority, nothing can happen to you that God does not design for your ultimate good. So it sounds to me like even if something bad happens to you, if you're under God-given authority, then it's God designed it for your good. If something good happens to you and you're under God-given authority, then God designed that for good as well. But if you get out from under that authority, the protection of the direction of parents, church, employers, or government, that allows Satan to bring destruction. So if something bad happens to you, say you go to Gothard, and you're like, hey, my cat died. That's just a dumb example, but say you said that. And Gothard was like, well, were you under God-given authority? And he lists out the criteria, and you say, yeah. Then he can say, well, God designed that for your ultimate good, so really, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you say no to the criteria, he can be like, well, Satan is attacking you. So it doesn't matter what ends up happening. He can talk his way out of it. And even if he was the one who caused the consequences of whatever bad thing happened to you, he can always lay the blame on either God or Satan. God or Satan. Not his fault ever. So I thought that was just a very interesting side note to the unfreezing portion. And then the last thing is that a lot of times they will bring the new converts and link them with people who are more experienced. So the new converts, if they have any kind of doubts or have any kind of questions, the older converts can have this sense of like, oh, everything's good, everything's fine, like what's the big deal? And it causes the new convert to push away those questions. So after the group unfreezes your true self and disorients you, then they can go ahead and start the changing process. So that's when they start imposing the new identity on you. Lots of indoctrination, a lot more conferences, videos, new understanding. That's the biggest part, new understanding. So a lot of times these groups will say, there's a problem with the world, there's a problem with you. We have all the answers. Gothard was all about that. He was always talking about some revolutionary new thing that he had learned. He would go up to a place that the group owned called Northwoods, and he would be fasting and praying. And every year God would just all of a sudden show him something new in scripture, and he was just so excited, and he was going to teach you all the things that you needed to know, and it was going to be 10 steps to joy, or 20 steps to Christ's commands. Just had the information that nobody else had. And so during this time, you get to the point where you start accepting the crazy stuff. And I'm going to put a link down below, but the wisdom booklets are probably the best picture of this. So for instance, once you got into the group, we had the wisdom booklets, and those were the teaching materials that were the foundation for our homeschool curriculum. So we would go through booklet 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now we've gotten to booklet 36. And this particular booklet talks about assault and battery, and it talks about rape. And as you're going through all the different steps, it tells the girl she needs to cry out. And if she doesn't cry out, then she's just as culpable as the person who raped her. And so when you hear that, you're like, excuse me? How is that even possible? Like, how do you even get the Bible to fit into that? Well, it took about 36 booklets to do all the mental gymnastics to get you to take in this information that is so insane. And in another part of the booklet, it talks about, when you're asking somebody who says, I've been raped, you need to ask them what they've been wearing. Just all of the things that you think are crazy, outlandish things to ask when somebody has been raped. But we took that in because it was such a slow transition to get to the point of this insane mental gymnastics. So the last part is the refreezing. So now that you've torn down the old person and you've stuffed the new person full of the new indoctrination, now you can refreeze, or basically you've recreated a new person. So now this person has accepted the group. Now they're going to change everything about who they are. So they're going to change their clothing. They're going to change the way they talk. They're going to change a lot of times the diet. They'll stop hanging out with old friends. They might even stop talking to family, depending on whether or not they can indoctrinate their family members as well. And they're just going to completely accept the cult for what it is. And again, what they do is that they will pair the older members with the newer members so that they can really bind that new person into the group. And that's what we did as well. Now, I don't have as much personal experience with these, the unfreezing, changing, and refreezing, because I was indoctrinated by proxy. My parents were the ones who were indoctrinated, and it was shown in a church. The basic seminar that my parents went to was in a church, and then the advanced seminar was, I believe, at a ballroom. It was a hotel ballroom. They went to more of a regional one, so they were with a ton of other different families or parents, and learned all the stuff to get into the homeschool portion of things. So next time I'm going to talk more about the things that cults control, the aspects that cults control, and I will have some input from some of my peers who were in the group as well. So I hope that'll be helpful and interesting to you. And if you guys have any questions, always feel free to message me. I'm always here to discuss. Maybe you've been in a similar situation, or you're realizing through the information I'm giving that you are in a cult. But I hope that you guys have a great week, and I hope you found this interesting. I'll talk to you later. Bye.